I'm only here because of Peter. I mean that figuratively in terms of my enormous wealth, but also in terms of literally being here tonight because I was asked to come here. So I met a lot of great people. Glad that I could be here. Unlike many Silicon Valley stories, mine didn't begin in a dorm room or in a garage. Mine began in a 19-foot camper trailer, more specifically, a camping trailer that was built using the finest technology available to material scientists in the early 1970s. I started living in it when I was 17 years old and lived there for quite some time as I was going through college and also as I was dropping out of college. And as far as the living space goes, I think it looked pretty crazy to visitors. I didn't get very many. It sort of resembled, in many ways, a cross between the stacks from Ernest Cline's Ready Player One and Walter White's Meth Lab from Breaking Bad. But to me, it was my laboratory. It was the place that I lived, and it was the place that, in some ways, I thought of as my spaceship. This place where I could use virtual reality technology that I was building to go anywhere and to do anything. And the aliens outside my spaceship, my neighbors, undoubtedly thought that I was the one from outer space. Why wasn't I in college? Why wasn't I getting a normal job? Why had my parents homeschooled me? Why was I participating in all these anti-social and dangerous hobbies like virtual reality and building weapons? That this is California. If you build weapons, you're one step away from being a serial killer. But I think a lot of people had doubts, especially people who knew me when I was growing up. Why is Palmer throwing his life away? Why is he working on this technology that, though it had been very popular in the 80s and 90s in a pop culture sense, had never taken off, had never gone anywhere, had never led to any lasting success for anyone? Peter once observed that, and I have the quote here, "The most contrarian thing of all is not to oppose the crowd, but to think for yourself." Having now worked in an industry, the technology industry, where I would say upwards of 95%, maybe even safely you could say 90, 99% of executives' employees fall within a narrow ideological window, the willingness to explore and to hold beliefs that are your own and not those of the majority that surround you are increasingly rare, and that's really a problem because it's an increasingly vital virtue, not just for those who hold the minority opinions, but for the health of society in which tolerance and open exchange and intellectual diversity are respected and encouraged on their own merits, even when you do disagree with them. And that includes ideas that seem obviously wrong. That includes ideas that seem like a waste of time. That includes things that people do that seem like a waste of resources to rational people. Sometimes it's good to be rational most of the time, but sometimes behavior that seems irrational is a prerequisite for technological progress to occur. So I have to admit, I was working on VR not because I thought there was a rational path to it working out. I was really just screwing around with the thing that I thought would be the most fun for me to spend my time. I was in the right place at the right time. Like many others in my generation, I grew up with a love of video games. I grew up with a love of the dopamine drip of modern gamer culture. And I also was a connoisseur of internet memes. In his 1976 classic, The Selfish Gene, evolutionary biologist Richard Dawkins famously introduced the concept of the meme as packets of information that spread from one brain to another. Now, internet memes they operate in a similar way. They're packets of information expressed in often humorous ways to make a point, or to convince somebody of something, or just to get a laugh sometimes. I'll digress here and say I once had a public speaking teacher in my brief time in college who told me there are two ways to be a great public speaker. The first is to be a great public speaker. The second is to be a bad stand-up comedian. And I've seen a lot of that tonight, and it continues with me. One of the cool things about being able to spread ideas on the internet in these kind of little packets is that they're not a heavy lift, both on the person who's creating them or on the people who are receiving them. You don't have to read an article. You don't have to sit through a lecture that you didn't want in college. If you don't like them, you can just scroll on by, or if they're on a billboard, you can just drive on by. Part of the Atlas Society's outsized influence with younger people who are typically not known for holding objectivist beliefs or really supporting the ideas of individual liberty and freedom, being an anti-work communist is very, very popular now. a lot of that influence is because they've really been able to master that art of connecting with people where they are, using the mediums that they're going through at the moment. Now, I did read Atlas Shrugged when I was much younger, and it really did radicalize me to believing all kinds of crazy things that are dangerous to believe today. But I will say I didn't really appreciate how important it was to actually do these things. I was largely, I guess, not anti-political, but anti-spending time on political things. I much preferred working on technology. Now, I had to change my perspective after a few events that occurred in my life, and I won't belabor the point because there's nothing worse than a professional loser, a professional victim. I refuse to be a professional victim, though I am consumed with rage every day. But you see, I got fired from my own company because I gave $10,000 to a group that ran a single anti-Clinton billboard. It was actually pretty tame. It was a picture of Hillary Clinton and the caption, "Too big to jail." I will even put it into further context to make myself even more tame. This wasn't even during the whole lock her up thing about the emails. This was actually in the context of some of the other things she was doing that were being compared with other people in the intelligence community who were mishandling classified information, who were going to prison for it. I thought it was very funny. So I gave him $10,000, which to me, as a newly minted rich man, it really wasn't anything. I thought very little of it. And, I thought it was pretty tame, but immediately after this happened, there were hundreds of press articles. Some of them were accurately reporting the situation. Most were not accurately reporting the situation. There were a lot of posts on social media that were not true, that were unfortunately amplified by the professional media, saying that I'm racist, that I'm sexist, that I'm misogynistic, that and all these things just on the basis of me giving $10,000 to this group. It wasn't like they dug up other donations to other groups. That actually was it. But unfortunately, perception is often reality, and I had gone from just 3 years previously being on the cover of Wired magazine as the guy who was going to change the world, finance, sex, and everything, and instead I won the coveted Wired title, "The Worst Man in Silicon Valley." No, wait, I'm sorry. No, that's not true. I just remembered, my notes are actually wrong. They changed it. It's the worst person in Silicon Valley. They had to change it. Now, I'm not even joking. It sounds like it's a hilarious joke, but it is not. So what I learned from my experience of unleashing hell on earth for just supporting the wrong candidate and just putting a few of my nickels towards something that I thought was funny, I learned that what's at stake goes beyond which candidate wins at political office. It goes beyond whether or not Hillary really is unjailable. It goes to what kind of values we value in American culture, and by extension, the rest of the world that looks to us for leadership, or if they don't, they should. Are they the values of reason, individualism, truth, tolerance of dissent in pursuit of that truth? Or are these postmodern ideas of rejecting the truth, distorting language, distracting people, and dividing people and destroying everyone who disagrees with you, whether they're coming after you or just trying to say their piece peacefully and maybe in a funny way? Like I said earlier, I confess I was largely apolitical for most of my career, and I focused on building actual technology, but that isn't a luxury I feel I can afford. That's one of the reasons that I think the work that everyone in this room is doing is so important. I really would have thought this was a huge, colossal waste of time nonsense when I was starting my company, but I now understand that it's one of the few things that keeps people energized, doing the right things and pushing the right things forward. Now, after I got run out of Silicon Valley, I was the worst person in Silicon Valley. I think that most people would have left. They would have sold their beautiful Atherton mansion and maybe moved to Puerto Rico for the favorable taxation. But not me. I think I decided that I was going to keep fighting for a few reasons. One of them is that I knew Peter, and he encouraged me to keep doing what I was doing and told me that I had his support. And that really meant a lot to me because I knew that there was at least one person who really supported me, not just then, but had supported me in a lot of ways that people are not even necessarily familiar with. This wasn't the first time that Peter had helped me when very few people were willing to even talk to me. When Oculus first started, we had a lot of attention. We were one of the hottest things in tech. Everybody wanted our demo. If anyone's seen the HBO television program Silicon Valley. It was like when Pied Piper was raising money. Everyone was talking about it. They were all in the Starbucks right off of Sand Hill Road talking about how this is the hottest, coolest thing. And we had no problems giving demonstrations to people. People really wanted to see what we had. They wanted to check out this cool, incredible virtual reality technology that was going to change the world and sex and everything. And the problem is that nobody was actually willing to write a check. Everyone wanted the demo, but they pointed out, hey, this is crazy. We love your tech, we love your team, but this is just too wild for us. There's never been a successful VR company in history. There's never been a successful VR entrepreneur in history. By extension, there's never been a successful VR investor in history, and we don't really intend on being the first. And so while this is great and it's a fun gimmick, we just can't get our heads around it. We don't think that it makes sense. We don't think it's rational. And Peter and his partners at Founders Fund were the very first VC to agree to make an investment. They saw it. And also, like that episode from HBO's television program Silicon Valley, as soon as one investor was in, everyone was tripping over themselves. And I think that was doubly so because it was Peter and Founders Fund. They said, oh my God, someone else thinks this is a good idea? Peter thinks it's a good idea? Well, of course, it was obvious all along then. And this really shows how having a contrarian idea, believing in something that nobody else believes in, can actually flip radically fast into having everyone who said that you were crazy and that it made no sense, all of a sudden acting like it was common wisdom. Everyone saw it. In fact, you didn't really do anything because everyone could have done it. It was obviously going to happen. Anyway, that check was probably the most important check of my life, and it was a big deal. I think about it a lot. So obviously, I admire Peter's extraordinary success as an investor, as an executive and entrepreneur in his own right, and also as an author. I admire the philosophic way that he approaches thinking about policy issues. I admired his vast knowledge about science, geopolitics, history, health, and wealth, and also, yes, the wealth just for itself. That's a sign of a winner in my book. But most of all, I admired his independence, his willingness to hold beliefs that very few people agree with him on, something that he's famous for quizzing people on. His disdain for being an insider, for following the approved script, for conforming to the majority when he disagrees with it. Born in West Germany, spending part of his childhood in South Africa and Namibia, changing elementary school 7 times before his family settled in America, Peter may have acquired part of that independence from the actual experience of being an outsider. He studied philosophy and earned his law degree at Stanford, but he only spent enough time in law and government to decide that he was less interested in working within these institutions and more excited about starting up and investing new enterprises himself. Within 2 years of starting Thiel Capital, he co-founded PayPal and led it as CEO until selling it to eBay for an incredible, at the time, it's hard to believe in these wild financial times. It's just with trillions of dollars flying around everywhere. It's hard to believe that it was a big deal, but man, it was a big deal in 2002. Sold it for $1.5 billion. He was the first outside investor in Facebook, acquiring a 10% share all the way back in 2004. Since then, he's founded a global hedge fund, the Founders Fund, and Palantir Technologies, which specializes in data analytics and is one of the most patriotic companies that is out there. Through the Thiel Foundation, he also you guys are gonna have to stop clapping, I gotta finish this. I'm running out of time. The clock, it's bad. Through the Thiel Foundation, he funds research into artificial intelligence, life extension, seasteading, and all kinds of other things. He also provides Thiel fellowships for promising young people not to go to prestigious universities, but to pursue an independent path. Not necessarily the right thing for everyone to do, but there's a lot of people for whom that is the right path. Today, Thiel Fellows have raised millions of dollars in venture capital, launched many successful startups, created countless jobs, and brought clean water, solar power, and all of the other hippie things to Africa. In doing all of these and more, he has inspired a heck of a lot more people to go out and do the same kind of stellar things that he has done for themselves. I think it's fair to say that in business, in politics, and in philanthropy, Peter Thiel really knows how to pick a winner. And in honoring my friend Peter, so does the Atlas Society, on whose behalf I'm honored to present him with this year's Lifetime Achievement Award. Coming up here, Peter.